So before I start my superintendent's report, we have tonight with us our auditor. So I'd ask Chris to come up and from Evans Marshall Pease and to provide a brief summary on our annual audit before we submit that to the state. I did not receive any submitted questions. Wes did submit one late today about fund balance, and I know Chris already has it in his report. Last week, I'm sorry. It didn't come within my normal window, so I didn't see it today. But Chris has that. So, Kristen, if you want to introduce the work you've been doing with Chris over the last few months and allow Chris to go, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the annual audit starts, a lot of the work starts over the summer where Chris and his staff ask for information. And so Chris has been working hard for the past several months to complete the audit for us. So I'm excited to have him here. The best part about Chris is that he's been with our district for a while, and so he's really familiar with how things work, and that's been great as we transition to the new financial software and locating the information that he needs still and things of that nature. So I'm really excited to have Chris here and present to you all.
What Christian was saying too, I think what helps with me in the district as well is that my firm also audits the treasurer's office, and I actually had to do some work with the audit over there this year as well because we were trying to transition the new cash balances, and I went over there to finalize the audit there as well. So I feel like I have a pretty good background, not only with this district, obviously, but with the treasurer. So I think that makes me pretty well-rounded as an auditor too, because I kind of get the big picture of everything. I'm going to do a brief summary. I'm not going to really go through numbers, so we don't really have to worry about designating certain pages. And then if the board has any questions, then I'll do my best to answer those. So to begin, the audit went very well this year, even with all the COVID restrictions. As an auditor, it's difficult enough as it is when things are going, smoothly in our country. But Kristen and 208 accommodated my firm well. Fortunately, we're a small firm, so we were able to get in here. I know a lot of other bigger firms were really strictly remote, and I think doing a remote audit is very difficult. I mean, how can you look at things and inquire and observe to make sure the purchases are actually being done? So I think Kristen did a wonderful job overseeing her second audit now. I had no audit reporting or internal control issues. The district ended the year with an operating cash balance of about $16.2 million. That was a slight increase from the prior year, but also remember within that $16.2 million, we do have about $2 million in reserve within the working cash fund for some future projects. So that brings our operating cash balance to be more around the $14.2, $14.3 million range. For the fiscal year 2020, our pension liabilities overall decreased, and we had a slight increase in our other post-employment benefit liabilities, and that increase was solely from the Teachers' Health Insurance Security Fund. Some people call it TRIP. This increase was due to additional members participating in the cost-sharing plan. And just to note, for pension and other post-employment liabilities, those are all measured by third-party actuaries. So a lot of the reasoning behind those numbers, I can't really explain because obviously I'm not an actuary. They're given to me directly, and those just go in the audit report. I'm pretty well versed in certain areas within the pension studies, but they've gotten extreme and lengthy, especially over the past 5 years. I'd like to thank Dr. Skinkis, Kristen, and the entire business department. Especially we had some payroll issues, and Kristen got that straightened out with some personnel coming in and out. But I would like to thank everybody for their hard work, and then Kristen's timely responsiveness during, obviously, this pandemic. And then at this time, I'll take any questions the board may have.
Chris, just to clarify, this is the most important thing, any internal control items or issues?
No, and I briefly mentioned that, but no internal control issues. Again, my firm audits about 30 school districts. Main thing with internal controls, school districts are sometimes limited to personnel. With the small size, we do the best that we can. Board's oversight, Kristen, you have the treasurer. I believe the controls are sound. I know we had a study at one point done, it could be 5 years now, but the recommendation is typically the same when you have internal control auditors coming in. They say hire more people, right? So, it's push and pull with saving money and hiring additional people to do things. But overall, we do a fantastic job here with our controls.
Okay, and no findings?
No findings.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, I have a question.
Sure.
You said 14.3 million is in the fund balance,
Yes.
but then it
Cash.
says 30.5 million and 20.2 million, so it gets confusing, right?
Well, yeah, you're talking operating versus non-operating fund balance, right?
Yeah. So where do we stand on how much money, because there's a lot of talk about it.
Sure.
And the community comes and asks us, so we want to kind of explain to the board where we are, where that sits with the state recommendations, other school districts.
Are you asking me, do you feel that we
What the actual
have?
number is, and then
The operating.
And then why?
operating.
So our operating fund balance, remember, so our operating fund balance is educational account, working cash account, which that is the general fund, O&M, trans, and IMRF. That's your operations. Debt service, capital projects, fire prevention and safety, those are non-operating funds. Those are kind of left outside the scope of things in terms of the public trying to say a school has too much or too little money, okay? So our operating fund balance, cash balance, can't say fund balance because we're accrual, so we got to look at just cash, was 16.2 million. So within that 16.2, we have $2 million in reserve for future projects as well. So that's where I said about 14 million. In terms of, do we have too much money or too less of money? That's not something that I'm going to comment on. That's something that, the board oversees, and from, your investment policies within to say, are we doing what we're supposed to do with our money, right? I'm here just to make sure the financial statements are materially correct. I'm not here to say you have too much money or too less of money.
So the 14 million is roughly 48-50%, correct? And so, I think the state recommendation is at least 33 on hand?
That'd be accurate.
Okay. So instead of having 3 months on hand, we have approximately 5 to 6 months.
You do it, and remember too, the way Cook County distributes its taxes, they come in bunches, right? So a lot of the time, the district has to use property taxes to fund future months because we're still waiting on collections. So we always got to be careful with that too, because I've seen with other districts that, yeah, they may say we have a little bit too much cash, but all of a sudden your taxes dry out, right? Now you're running low on money. So you got to be careful with the collections as well.
Okay. So it's good practice to have 4 or 5 months on hand.
I would agree.
In this, so my question actually tracks to that a little bit. I was looking at the, I'm not sure this is your management note. We talk about factors affecting the district's future, and what's not referenced here is the FY20 delay in property tax collections for Cook County. And I think that is perhaps material to us as the year unfolds. But what is referenced is the future funding formula and the fiscal soundness of the state. Could you elaborate on that and what the specific concern might be?
Sure. So last year, I believe, it could have been the year before, general state aid was eliminated, and evidence-based funding was taken over. So basically what that did was lower income areas started receiving additional funding, while areas that are more prestigious, I would say, started receiving less. So what the factors here are explaining is basically the state's trying to shift the way it distributes its funding to try to level out lower income areas versus areas that have higher taxpayer bases, and therefore to have them receive more grants so they can operate.
And understood, and I appreciate your explanation, but this is a I would suggest a general concern. It's not specific to the year that was audited. This is a general
Correct,
state
correct,
fiscal management note. Okay.
correct. And
I think
typically,
it's just important that there's a concern that's out there that doesn't have a deadline necessary that we're reacting to, but we have to be mindful of as we plan for the budget year ahead.
Sure,
Because there's a good chance that we will not, I think we've been already informed, will be held flat for now, unless.
Correct, and there's a lot of concern about the state being able to continue to fund evidence-based funding at the level in which it is currently being funded at.
Right, I think pre-COVID, right, if we looked at the numbers, there's basically 3 buckets in this state: pre-K, K-12, higher ed. So, right, the state has put all of its eggs in the K-12 basket, leaving the other 2 basically orphaned at this point. It's not sustainable in order to fund all 3 levels of education in this state. It's just not.
I think the formula also called for 250 million in additional funding every year. And if you're going through a pandemic and all of the income that level revenue sources the state has are drying up, or experiencing difficulty, it's going to be hard to provide that additional funding. That's why they held us flat for this year.
and to comment on that too, it's, for being a one-school district, it's different than being in a consolidated district, right? So if you're in a consolidated district, that funding can be split among all your schools within that district. When you're working with just a high school district, and then they're cutting or adding funding, it makes it a little bit more difficult for this district than it would be for a district with 15 schools, because they can take part of that was maybe allocated for property taxes that was going to be for pre-K, and they can use it for 7th, 8th grade, and they could spread the love across the board. So, that makes it a little bit more difficult for this district compared to others.
Sounds like an argument for consolidation.
Absolutely. Okay, any other questions? Thanks, Chris.
Chris, thank you very much.
You're very
Good job
welcome.
as always.
Take care. Thank you, guys. Stay safe.
I guess I actually had one more question. I'm so sorry, as you stood up. I apologize. Were there any findings on the Township audit? I guess that's kind of I just saw it in the packet, and I hadn't had a chance to look at it
No,
previously.
the Township audit went fine. Everything was great. With new system, took a little bit more time, but
It was also a clean audit.
it was clean.
Okay, thank you.
And you can get that audit report too, and if you'd like, I can send it to Kristen as well.
It actually, I just hadn't had a chance to
Oh,
look at it.
no
I
worries.
believe we have it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. Take care.